cloud. Okay, so it's being recorded to the cloud, and so what word? Say that again, Natasha.
Sorry, you're kind of going in and out on my audio. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, what organization do you work for?
I work for USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Okay, great. And Priska, get this back on record. You're working for what organization in Miami?
Miami-Dade College, Miami Fashion Institute.
Great. And Jennifer just passed her dissertation. So she's
good.
an advisee. She is my 34th or 35th advisee to pass her dissertation. You are my first one at IU. So this is a lineage between you and Jennifer. Jennifer, you want to tell John what your dissertation was on?
Yeah. Hi, John, and hi, everyone. I'm Jen Park. My dissertation looked into the relationships among sustainable work environments, human agency, and looking into the outcomes of innovative behaviors and openness to change. I looked into 5 large conglomerates in Korea and try to explore what motivates them to become more innovative and open in this rapidly changing work environments.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Which is maybe maybe we should get at that as the first question when we get to John, what he's doing in that regard, so we can address directly your dissertation, because I think this has been his career actually in some ways. So I want to get to everyone before we do that, Jen. So she just defended, and she's now on the phone talking about, and I can't say specifics, but she is in the midst of getting a job offer in a university setting. So
Okay.
And the dean at that place is I hired him when I was at West Virginia University. So I know the dean from a long time ago. So Xiaoying is a doctoral student. She's also TAing and helping. Xiaoying, you want to tell John what you're interested in?
Hi, Dr. John. And I have not been in any research group yet, but my research interest maybe involves some perspective about online learning and the design of online courses, especially the asynchronized or synchronized. Yeah, both are okay. Yeah, and then focus on the design part.
Okay, very good.
And Linda's with us from Fort Wayne. She's been in a class with me before, and she keeps asking that we bring in some corporate people. So this is the first of 3 weeks in a row. We'll have Tiagi next week. We have a guy named Saul Carliner who's in Canada. He's a big corporate person in Concordia University, in Montreal. So Linda's in a healthcare setting in Fort Wayne, right, Linda?
Well, actually, Noblesville, Indiana.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Much better.
A little bit south of Fort Wayne, but I work for Anthem Insurance Company.
Okay.
And I actually recently changed positions there. I'm a business change advisor now.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, very good. Very good.
I was in learning and development.
Okay.
You still have the cast on your wrist, or is that off now?
It's still on. I don't have it on right this second, but it's smaller. I just have it's getting better.
Good,
Yeah.
good. And Sunmei is in California like you. So Sunmei and Samuel are both in California. Sunmei works at Stanford. She's in Palo Alto. So she's my TA too. She's about ready to dissertate soon. She has to pass her qualifying exam. She's taking it right now. So she's an EDD. We have a PhD and an EDD and IST now. So we have 2 different doctorates. And Sunmei is interested in many things, including robotics, including online learning, but including micro-credentials, including math education. The list can go on and on. So Sunmei?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your time anyway. So I live in California and I'm working for Stanford University. Actually, my job is, developer. So usually I'm working with the professor and research team to design and develop the mobile app for education purpose. And then I'm very interested in, actually first time I got interested in mass education, but nowadays I'm really interested in peer interaction, internet, over online. That's because after COVID-19, I saw that my children had a hard time with, communicating with their peers. So I think that, oh, maybe I can help. That's because I'm a developer. Yeah, that's it.
Very good.
He's a
Nice to
mobile app
meet you.
developer. So, John, where do you live in San Francisco area?
Nice to
What's
meet
what
you.
suburb?
Not too far from Sume.
Yeah, so where?
Yeah, so I'm out in Danville, California. So it's in the East Bay of San Francisco.
East Bay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I mean, oh, okay. Yeah, really close. It's just
Yeah.
1 hour and north. Right.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
call all of
that's
this
good.
sort of the same area. I know people out here kind of distinguish between North Bay, South Bay, the peninsula. It's all the
Yeah,
San Francisco
right.
Bay Area, and I think it's all pretty close.
Yeah, really close.
Yeah.
That's
An
good.
hour by car in traffic would take John an hour and a half on his bicycle. So, he rides his bike. There's a video you can find online. He was in Chicago riding his bike to work. So you still ride your bikes like that?
I ride, I run, I do all of that kind of stuff. A lot of hiking, a lot of camping, anything outdoors, I'm typically doing it.
So we want to talk to you about the adventure aspect of your professional life, because you've done a lot in the area of adventure. But first, we need to get the last couple of people. Shukufe is in science education. You want to tell them what your interests are?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Shukufe. Thanks for coming, and it's really I'm looking forward to hear from about you about the media learning. I'm a doctoral student in science education, and my interest is like for science education for the refugee children. So I have few projects going on, and one of my project is about the globalization of science education, where we are really interested to incorporate that instructional strategy for media learning. So that will be really learning for you to know about these projects.
Okay. Okay.
And
Is
so
anybody in Bloomington?
Raise your hands if you're in Bloomington. So 4 of us, and Chen Ming just showed up here. 5 of us are in Bloomington. So half,
Okay.
more than half, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So, but yeah, you're right. There's a huge shift that's happened to the majority of students are not in Bloomington
Yeah.
in the program. So
Yeah, that's funny.
yeah. So Samuel, you want to tell them what your interests are?
Yeah, my apologies. I just finished my class, so I couldn't turn on my video. I'm so sorry. Hi, John, and hi, class. I'm Professor. My name is Samuel Eddington. I'm located in Cypress, California, and I'm a college instructor teaching at San Bernardino College. I'm teaching mathematics and computer science. And before coming here, I was teaching at U.S. Coast Guard Petty Officers Academy. And my journey as professors actually began there. And I had interest in curriculum change, especially technology part, because I was teaching mathematics and computer science. So this is biggest opportunity for me because I know nothing about instructional technology, but this is so big for me. So I can say how much I love it. Anyhow, glad to see you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Mhm.
So the last person, and I think Samuel was born in Korea and lives in California.
Correct, sir. Yeah.
Sunmei was born in Korea and lives in California.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Let's
We
know
have-
that. Hello, guys. Yeah.
we have 2 Korean transplants. So my son was born in Korea, but he's not in
Wow.
Cali. He's in Portland. So
Mhm.
Chen, you want to just say hi to John and tell him what your interests are, Chen?
Thank you, Dr. Bonk. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. I'm Dr. Bonk's advisee, and I'm on my second year
PhD program for IC program, but actually this is my third year in the US because my situation is a little special. I'm the transfer student, and I spent my first year at UT Austin, and that program is called Learning Technology. And it's very similar to our IST program, but due to some personal reasons, some funding issues, and I finally decided to transfer. And Dr. Bonk gave me an interview, and I'm so happy that he offered me this great opportunity to be his one of his advisees. So my current research interests focus on the MOOC design and development. And actually, I'm going to have my first presentation for my first dossier this Friday, which makes me pretty nervous. It's about how to integrate the gamification into the LESL, that is learning English as a second language, because I have the teaching background for this. So I'm interested in how to combine the gamification elements into the English language and teaching and to motivate or engage students. So let's see what will happen this Friday. Wish me good luck. Thank you so much.
You don't look nervous.
Yeah.
You don't look nervous, but she is, believe me.
I just try to pretend.
You look fine.
So we've got fashion people, math people, computer science people, English, teaching a second language, just a wide gamut of interests, science education.
Yeah.
And Natasha, your specific interest was, remind me?
I work in international education, so I really am interested in bringing technologies into the work that we do in international education.
Right. Okay.
Very good.
And so a little background, John. When John was here, and at that time, both he and I were in educational psychology. It was counseling and educational psychology. About 2003-04, IU got huge amounts of money to create a learning science program, and 3 faculty from IST decided to move to educational psychology and create a learning science program. At the time, I tried working with them and creating that learning science program, but the 3 individuals that had moved from IST into educational psychology, 2 of them were not easy to work with. So I ended up moving to IST. So it was a 3-for-1 trade. So I've been in IST since 2005. Okay, 17 years. I was 13. I was actually spent about half my career in Ed Psych, about half my career in IST. Well, this May, the learning science people are joining IST. So my old department, so there is no Ed Psych anymore.
Okay.
Technically. There sort of is, we're ranked in Ed Psych, but we don't really have an Ed Psych program per se. But those that formed, so there are human development people still sort of, but those that formed that were part of learning, cognition, instruction, when John was part of that program, became learning sciences. But the learning sciences people are now joining as a program within IST. So IST will have IST, adult ed, and learning sciences. And over the top of the 3 programs will be what's called learning, design, and technology, maybe as the big umbrella. So all these people are in IST, but they'll be in the program, could be certificate or master's or doctorate. Learning science people, they might be minoring in learning sciences, it might be minoring in adult ed or some other discipline. Just so the backdrop, John, to all this, and IST used to be on the 2nd floor, it's moved to the 3rd floor.
Okay.
So that's changed too. There's been a few minor little, on December 31st of this past year, I had to move out of my office. It was not an easy thing to do. That's a long story. About 35 suitcases of books were taken to the recycling center. Yeah. So catching John up a little bit, there is 1 faculty member left, well, 2. Professor Elizabeth Bowling, who was the chair of IST, came in 1992. She's still here. I'm still here. And a person named Martha Nikos in language ed is still here. That's about it for the faculty that were here when you graduated. It might be a couple more.
Yeah, I looked up the programs that you're talking about, and I'm going through the the staff and the faculty, and I'm like, I don't know any of these people, you know?
Yeah, you'll remember Charlene Connor, the office manager, just retired last year. And then
Okay.
Jack Cummings retired a couple of years ago, but
Oh,
he's
did
still
he?
around, okay?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
he's got his sailboats in town, and I'll talk to you about him later.
Okay.
So there are people still around, John, but let's go to Jennifer. Let's go to Jennifer because she just passed her dissertation. She's interested again in the changing hierarchies in a business world and how to motivate employees, what kind of management structures. I want to ask a different question before we get to Jennifer's. How did you move from the field of educational psychology? And what was your minor, by the way, when you were here? Was it psychology?
Let me walk you through a story.
Yeah,
I'm going to
that
share
sounds
my
good.
screen.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of work, Kurt, before we showed up here.
Great.
And so, you know, I appreciate the intros. You guys have given me a lot of what I was going to ask you during the session, but I really wanted to talk about, because I don't feel like I got this when I was in my program. I don't remember anybody asking me, so you're in this program, what are you going to do once you leave? And I wasn't like a lot of you guys who was already working. I was student, and then I was going to go out into the world. So I sort of entitled this thing Next Steps, and I was hoping to share some of the things that I've been doing over the past, few years. And maybe it'll give you some things to think about. It sounds like all of you have a lot of really good direction already. Some of you are already sort of in your fields. The degree will help you, move along, et cetera. But if you haven't thought about it, maybe some of these things that we talk about today can give you a little insight and give you just some more things to think about as you complete your education. So I called it Next Steps. And this is me, right? So I'm a true IU guy. I came in fall of 1982. I did a bachelor's degree in psychology. Then I did my master's degree in educational psychology. Jack Cummings was the guy who kind of brought me into the program. That naturally led to the doctoral program in ed psych, cognate and instructional systems technology. A few years later, I did some intensive study at Loughborough University in England. So it was a 120-hour intensive course, a lot of work in a very short period of time, but great experience. But that's my educational background. And then I was going to ask you, what are you planning to do after graduation? You guys have shared a number of things. And then I was just going to ask the question, have you ever thought about consulting? Right. So I'm in the consulting world. So I was just wondering, had people started to think about that? And I think Smith is doing some things that may be similar to what I'm doing. But in 1988, I was sitting where you guys are. I was actually the first year of my doctoral program. And Dr. Melinda, who I think was the chair of the department at the time, was teaching an instructional design course. And that's sort of where the light bulbs went off for me. I hadn't really figured out what I wanted to do all the way through my master's program, which probably is why I landed in the doctoral program. I needed more time to think. But during this course, this instructional design course, I met a guy that you will meet next week if you haven't already. But this guy was showing up once a week teaching. And when he came in, he would always say things like, last week I was at General Electric, and this is the problem they had, and here's what we were trying to do, and here's the work I'm doing. Then he'd show up the next week and he'd say, I was at Harley-Davidson earlier this week, and here's the kind of stuff that they're going through, and here's some things that I'm doing to help them. Every week he came in and he talked about these different companies he worked with. And for me, it just sounded exciting. I'm a guy who likes travel. I thought, this guy is going different places. He's meeting different folks. I'm not really sure that I'm that interested in any one thing in particular. So maybe this is how I spend my life, going around and kind of helping these different organizations with whatever their problems. And it seems like this work that I'm doing in my classes is going to be helpful, because that's kind of what this guy is doing. So when you guys meet Tiagi next week, Tell him John Graves said hello. I don't know if he remembers me. It's a long time ago, but he's the reason I got into consulting. And then I was just thinking, Kurt, about some of the things that I learned, and things I learned in the classroom and some other things, and I just kind of started writing them down. In terms of coursework, I thought my instructional design course really helped me out in consulting. There are obviously a lot of things around learning theories that have been helpful, and then statistics. Although I did not really enjoy my statistics classes, they have proven helpful while I'm out in the world kind of doing my consulting work. There were a lot of other things, I think, that helped me in graduate school that weren't necessarily classes. And they were things like learning how to do problem solving and project management, teaming, communication, negotiation, all of that research that we did. All of that stuff comes up in my world on a very, very regular basis. So some of those non-technical or soft skills or things that you may not be paying attention to are very helpful, when you continue on in your careers. Because again, a lot of you are already working and moving in certain directions. If you have time, and it sounds again like a lot of you guys are working, spend some time doing some internships or teaching assistants or whatever the case may be. I spent time doing 4 internships. Fortunately, I kind of figured out what I wanted to do early in the doctoral program. So I spent the summers taking off and doing these internships. And what I did was work with a lot of different types of organizations. So that first one, Altshuler, Melvoin and Glasser, is a CPA and consulting firm in Chicago, but it's a smaller firm. Arthur Andersen, however, was a very big company. So I did, some instructional design work with them. I actually worked at one of the ISPI. You guys are probably familiar with it, International Society for Performance Improvement. Did an internship with them up until. And then I said, how can I round this thing out? And I'm like, well, I haven't done anything with the government. So I went and did some work with the US Army, developing, I think at the time it was CBT, if you remember that kind of thing. But I thought the internships were helpful because they gave me some idea of, is this the stuff you're interested in? If you are interested in it, what type of environment do you want to work in? Do you want to work at a smaller company, a larger company? Do you want to work in the government? I couldn't really make up my mind, so I went into consulting. So I wasn't sort of locked down to one company, one organization. So in '95, I decided to go into business management consulting, and specifically it was change management. So change, if you don't know, is all about helping individuals and teams and organizations go through transitions. Anytime a government agency or a company is going to do some type of a change, there's going to be impacts to people, to the employees. I go in and help with that. That's the kind of work I do. And I've only worked with a couple of companies. The first one was with Accenture, which is a really big company. When I was there, when I left, I think we had 250,000 employees. I think they're now up to 500,000, so somewhere around 500,000 people in the company. And now I work with a really small company. So Accenture is one of those companies that does a lot of things. So they have folks who are specialists around technology. They have people who are process types. They have strategy folks, and they had change management people. So people who sort of help with the people side of the change. Emerson is a really small company. I think there are 15 of us. So from 250,000 to 15, but Emerson is a company that only focuses on change management and learning and development. So we are, everybody in the company is like me, right? So they have a lot of experience. They usually have, advanced degrees. We're experts in change management, and that's the only thing this company focuses on. And I've been with them since 2011. So a couple of companies in the last, almost 27 years. These are some of the places I've been able to work. So I wanted to travel, and so far it's worked out for me. I've had an opportunity to float around. I keep a log. It's 72 cities at this point. But I've enjoyed working in all of these places. I especially enjoy, my time in Asia. For some reason, it seems really exotic to me, but kind of stuff I wanted to do, and I've had an opportunity to do it.
I love this slide, John. Go back to the slide once. This is great. That's a great slide. My nickname in my blog is Traveling Ed Man. So I don't think I've done 72 cities, but I'm probably right behind you there. And this is a great way to represent yourself. I really like this. I want to comment on a couple of things before I go. Dr. Melinda was the one who created the class that I'm teaching right here. So
Okay.
So you go, so there's connections all over, but yeah, he designed this course and he's been a guest in this course a couple of times.
Okay.
He's still in Bloomington. He's still around. He has a new book this year. So even though he retired 10 or 15 years ago, he's still active in the field and he's a leader in the field. So I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Melinda. I'm glad you mentioned Tyagi because he is our guest next week. Yeah. And he is very active and he is influential and he was a faculty, part-time at least, faculty here. I'm glad you mentioned statistics. I've been mentioning statistics as a key. People need to think about taking stat, even though they don't like stats. It will help you. Or inquiry, or just taking more, methodology or inquiry methodology. There's now a master's degree in quantitative, qualitative methods, which are, useful wherever you end up. I'm glad you mentioned Fort Knox. I was working as a senior research fellow with the DoD and the Army Research Institute. And yesterday, John, was my 731st day of running in a row, so my 2-year mark. When I was at Fort Knox, I said, I'm going to go running tomorrow morning. I can't have breakfast with all of you. And they said to me, you can't go running at Fort Knox. I said, well, I know I'm going to go running. No, you can't go running. I said, why not? He said, you're going to be target practice. So I'm also glad you mentioned Arthur Anderson.
If you get too close to the fence, there will be an announcement telling you that you're too close.
You work for Arthur Anderson. That's great. I developed ethics cases for Arthur Anderson in the 90s, and they didn't work after Enron happened. But small world. There's all these connections, John. There's all these.
Very good.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I just had to stop you for a second. Get you to breathe.
I wanted to kind of just give you some idea of the types of companies I've worked with. These are some of the places that I've spent time over the past 27 years. And if you look at this, hopefully there are companies and agencies that you recognize, but you'll see that I've done work in the federal government. So I work with the U.S. Army. I've worked with the Air Force. I've worked with the Defense Logistics Agency. I've worked with the U.S. Postal Service. So a lot of federal government work. I've worked in oil and gas. So I've worked with Chevron and Amoco and Exxon. I've worked in the space industry with NASA and the European Space Agency. I've done financial services. So the Fed out here in San Francisco. I've worked with the Bank of China in Beijing. I've done a lot of products work. So you'll see Yeti, the guys who make the expensive coolers. Breville, the ones who, if you go into Williams and Sonoma and you need a coffee maker or bread maker or anything like that, they're a company based out of Sydney. Some work with them. Nike, everybody knows Nike, selling shoes and athletics. Some of the other products have been, around food. So Strauss Family Creamery, the Redwood Hill Farms, Mount Franklin Foods. So you can see that, again, for somebody who doesn't really have a strong interest in anything, consulting has given me an opportunity to kind of dabble in a lot of different industries and work with a lot of different companies, et cetera. It's hard to get bored when it continues to change. There's even a company on here that this Ingenio, they're astrologers. Coffee Meets Bagel is a dating company. So it's a wide variety of different folks you get to work with. And all of the people who work at these different organizations are very different. At NASA, I actually used my doctor title because there were so many PhDs walking around, so it made sense. And other places, they have no idea that I have a PhD because it's not something that's valued in their organization. You know,
The
you go to
Army would value that. The US Army would, definitely.
yeah, you go to places like Nike and you bump into athletes. I've met astronauts at European Space Agency and at NASA. So it's been a really, cool ride to hit a lot of these different organizations. And then I was just gonna, and I won't drain this, but just very quickly, this is some of the different types of work that I've done, and it's always a little different. So you're probably familiar with ERP systems like SAP and Oracle and things like that. I've done a lot of ERP implementation, so handling the people side of those change, because there are huge impacts to the organization from a people standpoint when you all of a sudden change the way you do your business with those systems. I've done some executive coaching, some leadership training. So working with Deloitte, you think about their partners. Those partners are people who are basically top of the food chain. They're the ones who are out there trying to sell work. We taught a course to them on remembering the importance of not only selling the work, but actually delivering the work. So I've done some things like that, done some team building. So some of the projects are pretty fun. And if you think about some of the things that Tiagi and his company do, I've done some of that kind of work. All kinds of stakeholder analysis, impact analysis. Sometimes I've come in as the QA guy. There's a change management effort going on or a training effort going on, and I come in to look over things to make sure that they are what they need to be. A lot of companies now have gotten smart. When I first started, folks weren't really in tune with what change management was and the importance of it. They thought, hey, you put a system in and maybe you do a little bit of training and everything is going to work out. They didn't do a lot around getting people ready for the change prior to the change. That has changed now. People understand that change management is important. And what typically happens is I get called in, or people like me, companies I've worked for will get called in to do the change management work. And folks are slowly realizing, you know what, in order to continue growing and in order to be successful, we're probably going to be changing from here on out. As a result, there are going to be projects over and over again that we have to implement and execute. It would be great if we had our own internal change management capability. So lately, I've been spending a lot of time teaching change management in organizations, helping organizations build their own change management in-house capability, building change models for organizations, coaching people within the organization on how to execute projects. So it's been changing over time, but you can see there are lots of different things that I get called in for, and it's always a little different. Sometimes you would like for it to be the same. Sometimes you don't want the stress of the new thing. You want to be able to pick something up that you've done before and kind of dust it off and maybe change the branding on the PowerPoint or something like that. But a lot of times these efforts are very different, but they've all been exciting. And every time you show up to one, you learn a little more, et cetera. And then just some of the trends, some of the things that I've been seeing lately. Obviously, with the pandemic, there's been a push towards learning, remote working. So we've been called in to help with some things around that. A lot of projects are going towards an agile methodology. You guys familiar with agile? Okay.
They might not be, because they might. We're early in that section of the course. So.
Okay, yeah. So if you think about it, there are, again, when I used to think about companies, and again, maybe I was just naive, but I would think of like somebody like a Nike. I think that they sort of make and sell athletic apparel. I didn't think about anything else that was going on at Nike. You tell me Miller Brewing, I say, okay, those are the beer guys. They make beer and they sell beer. But if you think about all those organizations growing and constantly changing to be successful, to be competitive, there are always a ton of projects that are going on within any organization. Well, every one of those projects has to be managed some kind of way. And typically folks were doing what they call waterfall methodology. So it's a phased approach. You may have come up with the strategy and build something, then you test it, then you execute it. The agile approach is different in that it is more iterative. So if you think about, they do these things called sprints. So in a 2-week period, they'll do as much as they can with regard to whatever the solution is, and then they'll put it in front of the client. Putting it in front of the client will give them an opportunity to get some feedback, and they can go back and they do another 2-week sprint. And they keep doing that. And the real benefit to that agile is giving folks who are impacted an opportunity to see it before it gets too far down the line. With that more phased approach, that waterfall approach, you'll see them, it's several months, a year into the project before a client or a customer finally gets to see what this thing is going to look like. And if you've missed the mark, it's kind of too late to make a whole lot of changes at that point. So a lot of folks are moving towards this agile methodology. And then there are cloud migrations. So cloud's a big thing now. So instead of having large data centers, folks are moving things to the cloud. So I did some work with Chevron where they had a 30-year-old data center that was sitting on an earthquake fault. And they said, hey, you know what, it's time to get this thing moved. So they bought a new facility down in San Antonio, Texas. We migrated everything over to San Antonio. It took about 5 years to get that project done. The longest I've ever worked with a client was 7.5 years, and that was with Chevron. 5 years later, we got the thing all set up, and not too long after that, decision to move to the cloud. So 5 years of sort of wasted work and money, but a lot of folks are moving things to the cloud these days. And then again, I mentioned the company's building that internal change capability. Lots of folks are starting to do that. And then I was just going to share, just kind of staying current and everything, because, once you leave school, it's harder and harder. Everybody kind of gets wrapped up into their work life and families and everything else. But I try to make a concerted effort to spend some time reading. And for me, it's always sort of business type things. So I read Forbes, I'll read Wall Street Journal. I spend time writing as well, because that's a good way to stay current. So that Technology Change book is a book that my current company put out. And although my name is not on the cover, I was a contributor to it. I've done a lot of technology change projects, all those large scale system implementations, et cetera. And then I do some blogs, blog posting. Here's one on working in Agile. Here's another one about cloud training for folks. And then networking is going to be important. Again, I mentioned ISPI. And another one that I have enjoyed over the years has been the Association for Experiential Education. So again, back with my adventure stuff, et cetera, I think, all of that kind of stuff is good. And I meet interesting people, different types of people in that organization. And then I was just going to ask the question. I mean, again, a lot of you guys are already sort of locked in and have some good direction, but, do you like to be challenged? Because my dog is beating on the door now. Sorry about that.
Meet everybody.
Do you like having different experiences on a very regular basis? I mean, it's hardly ever the same. I go into companies and I see what folks are doing, and I find out that they've kind of been doing that for X number of years. And I know my head would blow up if I had to show up to the same place, do the same thing over and over again. Maybe that's okay with you, but if you like these different experiences, maybe consulting is something that you would be interested in. Do you have an interest in business? Do you like coaching, advising, and facilitating, kind of working with people in all kinds of different environments and in different forms and fashion. Do you like to travel? You know, these are the things. I guess if you answer yes to this, consulting might be something you're interested in. I think I will stop there and just kind of open it up. Anything resonate with folks? Any questions you might have?
John, you might want to click the stop sharing button so I can see everyone again.
Yeah.
There you go. That was excellent. I mean, that's very nicely done.
I kind
mean,
of thought you might have a couple of questions around that stuff, so I figured I'd throw it into a deck so I didn't stutter too much.
We put you on the teaching staff right now. We need you. We don't have any corporate people left in IST, to be honest.
Right.
As Jennifer knows, we had more when she applied than what we have now. So there's a need for a person like you, and I think you did a marvelous job with that.
Thanks.
And we learned a lot. And I was real amazed at what you've been doing for the 27 years since you graduated. And it doesn't seem like you're slowing down anytime soon. So, it just sounds like
seems like yesterday, Kurt, that I left there.
Gosh, it does, and you have 3 degrees from IU. So, so that's number one. So I want to go back to your 2 questions you asked at the beginning. Does anyone here, the 2 questions you had, does anyone want to be a consultant? And what was the other question you had? What are you interested in doing when you're done with the degree?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyone here? Jennifer's shaking her head yes, even though you're going to higher ed. Jennifer, you got any interest in being a consultant?
Yeah, sure. I was able to resonate with what John was saying. Like I was in banking for a year, like my first job out of undergrad. I worked for HSBC Bank, the headquarters in Seoul, Korea. And then it was like too routine for me, like the transactions that I had to make, like everything was like the same every single day.
Yeah.
I even like my clients were, were banks all over the world, and I had to make a certain transaction like at 1 p.m., 2 p.m. It was like same thing every single day. And I was like going crazy because I realized I'm not that, it wasn't a good fit for me. And then so I went to consulting. I quit my job and I went to consulting. I worked for a company called Kantar Taylor Nelson Sofras, which is a market research consulting firm where we provide consulting service based on the panel data that we have. So we had consumer panels and we analyzed it and provided service to our clients. My clients were in the beauty cosmetic industry, like L'Oreal, Johnson and Johnson, and Estee Lauder, and some Korean cosmetic companies, and and yeah, it was tough. and it's amazing that you've done it for like 27 years because it gives, I mean, I got paid pretty well, but it's hard work and not many people can survive like 30 years.
Yeah, it's again, there are some people who I think really like routine. They like showing up to that same place. They like knowing when they're going to get off work. They like knowing they don't have to work on a weekend. They like knowing where they're going. They like knowing who their customer is. And at 1 o'clock, I have to hit this button. They like that sort of thing. But for some people, it just doesn't work out. And even if I'm on a project that I don't think is that interesting, or I'm in a, just a bad situation or something, I know that it's going to end here pretty quickly. Projects can range anywhere from a day to 7.5 years. So it really depends. So if you like variety, it's a good place to be.
So for me, like I went from consulting and to graduate school, whereas you were in grad school and then went to consulting. So I was my career was like the other way around. But I also can feel that like it's almost the same, like the skill sets, like, you know, the analytical thinking, the writing up and the presentation, presenting your ideas and writing it up in a logical way. And, you know, convincing your clients, like you're convincing your, you know, the readers of your research and your advisors and, you know, committee members and everybody. So it's like, you know, it's really,
all of that graduate school stuff. I walked out of there and I'm like, I'm doing all the things I did in graduate school.
Yeah, exactly. So I was very, thank you for your, you know, your, you know, slides, and it was amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Like I told one person today, you know, after you get tenure, every year after that, you're writing another dissertation. It's, you know, projects can be. So I want to go to this. I'll start with this article, John, and it's called Change Management, How to Be a Facilitative Leader. It was in LinkedIn. I found this today. How does one become a facilitative leader? What kind of tips can you give my students in this class about this article that you wrote up? I mean, I printed out another article, how to use hacking as a learning tool. Maybe we can talk about that too, but start with change management. What's it like?
You know, there are, well, let me start with the hackathons, because I think that's more fun.
Okay.
You know, when you're if you think about an organization, you think about a company, they have all these different areas of work, and there's probably going to be a technology team, an information technology division or function or something like that. So a lot of those folks will be the experts in all kinds of different technology. They are, you know, kind of the bread and butter. They know how all the things work. They know how to build things, et cetera. The unfortunate thing is these organizations are so large that those people get taxed. There are too many questions, too many problems coming into this small group of people within the organization. And so the thing that folks are learning is a lot of the things that are coming to IT are things that people can probably do themselves. And so this idea around hackathons has come up, and a lot of times it's around low code apps. So there are applications that are out there in the world that don't require, you know, some kind of degree in order to use. You don't need a bunch of coding languages, et cetera. With minimal training, you can go in and build a simple application. There may be some part of the organization that wants to build an app around so-and-so. Well, before, all of that stuff would go to the technology department. Now folks can do it on their own. So what I did was came up for Chevron. One of the things I did at Chevron was help them try to understand how the low-code applications work, and we made it a competition. So we invite people in, and everybody was excited about it. They heard about this hackathon thing, and the name hackathon just makes it sound like there's something going on and people get excited. But if you got invited to it, it was sort of an honor. You'd break out into these teams. You'd have 3 days basically not doing any work and coming in here and working on your apps. And then folks would win prizes and that sort of thing. Lots of companies are using hackathons to improve, enhance or enlarge the number of employees they have who can do some simple technology work. And just curious, has anybody ever participated in a hackathon or even heard of a hackathon?
We had guests from Cal State Monterey Bay a couple weeks ago. They're former students in the program who graduated, 15 years or so ago, and they've done hackathons at Cal State Monterey Bay. Very successful ones, if you all remember. And there's a company that I've been watching called Appian, APPIAN. They do AI-based apps. They get low code, kind of same thing. There's a lot of these companies being created today. They're helping. So it's not just employees, but also this is being used in university settings and high school settings to get young kids to get savvy with building apps. And
it would be a great thing to do with high school students. I mean, they're kind of all into it anyway. But I can't imagine the types of apps they would come up with, and all of a sudden they're millionaires or something, and it would bum me out because, you know.
Yeah, well, there are things that like that. So there's hackathons, there's codathons,
Yeah,
there's programming for everybody kinds of things, and so this is a way to get people the skills that they need when they enter the corporate world, right?
Yeah.
Or to build the confidence up of those who maybe had dropped out of high school. And or people who are incarcerated in California, they're having these hackathons to help them get ready when they go back into society. They have a skill base to be reacclimated in. And so this is a huge area. It's Sunmei's area. Sunmei, did you want to comment on it?
Actually, I heard that, but I never tried. But actually, I don't like it. That's because I'm a programmer. So maybe I will lose my job.
Here's the thing, the program.
I need programming.
If you're a programmer, this helps to free you up so you can spend time doing those really important things, the things that require, your mind share. If you're busy doing these little things, you don't have time to do the big ones. So it's good for you.
Okay, that's great. I feel better.
Hey, and in terms of facilitative leadership,
right.
A lot of times, folks, it's a really simple concept, right? That there are folks that people look at as leaders, right? So if you're the president of the company, or if you're the managing director of this, you automatically assume these are the people who are leaders. I'm a guy who's working down on the shop floor, or I'm somebody who's delivering the mail, or I'm somebody who's, doing something else that doesn't have leader or doesn't have one of those leadership titles in front of me. Therefore, I'm not a leader. And facilitative leadership says, everybody in the organization, everybody in the agency can be a leader. There are certain things that you do that are help you to drive change, help you to help the organization, helps the organization to be successful. I can show up to a meeting and be in a lower level role, but based on the questions I asked, it may help to set direction for the project that I'm working in. But it's really all about viewing yourself as a leader and then doing things to help facilitate that, to help move things along. A lot of folks may have been in leadership roles in other places. So, when I was younger, I was the captain of the football team. Well, that's a leadership responsibility. And some of those things that I learned playing football, I'm going to apply when I get to my organization. It doesn't matter that I don't have the title of senior vice president or something like that. There are certain things that I can do to help move things along. That's all facilitative leadership is about.
What football team?
College, I played with Indiana University.
You played for IU.
I was out there getting my head knocked around for first couple of years. And then
were you running back, or what were you?
I was a running back.
And
did you in high school? I played up in at Gary Roosevelt.
You play so a top school in Division I. So do you have any yardage gains, or did you get?
I spent more time practicing and getting beat up than anything else.
Well, that prepared you for grad school. The qualifying exams.
All the concussions helped.
So is anyone in here? I know Linda might want to jump in with some questions. We have a Jamboard if you want to post some questions. Who'd like to? I've got. Yeah.
We have 3 questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who would like to ask one of the questions on the Jamboard? Any of those 3 questions? Just jump in. Go ahead, Friska. Yeah.
Hi. So I had several questions, but I'm only going to ask the main ones. Is there any industry that you would like to do a project for that you haven't done? And what has been the most interesting or intriguing one that you've had so far?
Have I not worked someplace I want to work? Let's see, I've worked in federal government. I've worked in financial services. I've done some communication and high tech. I've done products, different types of products. I feel like I've kind of, I've never done healthcare, but I'm not interested in healthcare. I mean, I'm sure there's something interesting about it, but I it doesn't jump out at me. It doesn't, like, products and working at some place like Nike and being on the Nike campus and all that kind of stuff. That's interesting. Healthcare, I don't know, it just kind of sounds a little slow. I'm sure that's the next place I'll show up, based on this conversation.
Sorry,
then,
Linda. Sorry, Linda. So Prisca, your second question is similar to one I have. What was the second one again?
The second one was what has been the most interesting so far?
Yeah,
so I have a follow-up. What's the most significant moment in your career so far? So answer hers first and then mine.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed working in the space industry. The work that I did with NASA, they weren't my longest client. I did spend 4 years with them, and then I spent a year with the European Space Agency. But growing up and watching, NASA on TV and hearing about, the space shuttle and just all of those types of things, and then being in all of those places. Not in space, but being in Houston at the Johnson Space Center and going into the neutral buoyancy lab where they teach them how to do the spacewalks, the giant swimming pool, going into mission control and talking to the Capcom, the person who's talking to the folks on the International Space Station. I walk in and she kind of gave me the finger, like just a minute. And as it turns out, she was actually talking to people up in space when I walked in, meeting astronauts in the cafeteria. That was interesting to me. Every project has had something that's been interesting about it, all the different locations. So I've worked in all of the really cool places. I've worked in Paris, I've worked in Sao Paulo, I've worked in Tokyo, but I've also worked in places like Euclid, Ohio. And every one of them has something interesting because for me, it's, hey, I'm going to find new restaurants tonight. Just recently, I was in El Paso, Texas for a few weeks, and there are restaurants that I haven't been to. There are national parks that aren't far from El Paso. And so you always find something that's interesting and keeps you going. But I would say space industry has been the most interesting so far. And I don't know that anything's going to be more interesting than that.
What's the most significant moment of your career, would you say, if you had to pick a moment?
Just a single moment. You meet a lot of people with different things. And like I say, I've done a lot of federal government work. I had an opportunity to meet Colin Powell.
Me too.
Once upon a time, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I did too.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was a keynote at the Elliott Macy's Learning Conference, and Colin Powell was a keynote, and you guys to get in line and the picture kind of thing. Maybe not as good a meeting as your meeting, but anyways, yeah.
Yeah, it was a brief conversation, but it's nice to meet people like that.
What an incredible person. So
yeah.
Linda turned on her camera, so I'm assuming she's got one of the 3 questions on the board. So Linda, go ahead.
Actually, I don't have a question on the board, but I do have a question. I was wondering if what kind of follow-up that you do with these companies. Do you go back and say, hey, did the things we implement work for you? Or what is
that would be great, right? And lots of times nothing, right? You finish up and they really want, because there's a dollar amount associated with everything. And so in order to have me or somebody coming back and kind of checking up and doing follow-up things and pulling up the metrics and seeing how we're doing and making suggestions based on that, et cetera, that's more consulting fees. And so a lot of companies are almost ready for you to leave before it's even time to go. I have had an opportunity to do some of that, though, just recently with the company down in El Paso. So I spent the summer working with them, and it was last month, I think. What was supposed to happen was they were one of the ones who were interested in building a change management capability. We did some workshops with them. We did some coaching for a small staff of folks who were going to act as change management resources going forward. They were going to take all of these things that we did and sort of the strategy work and start executing on them using these tools and templates that we left with them, et cetera. Once a month, I think I was supposed to sort of go back and spend time with them and coach them up and see how they're doing, answer questions, et cetera. When it came time for that, they said, you know what, I think we got it. And it wasn't until a month or two ago, we got a call. And so I jumped on a phone with a couple of folks and answered some questions, but that was it. And haven't gotten anything since then, but that was a freebie, right? So we just got on and kind of talked. But if you wanted to continue the relationship, there's money involved. And unfortunately, people don't want to spend a lot of money. They've already spent quite a bit to have consultancies come in and help out. But you're right, it would be great if there were follow-up, and because the likelihood of organizations sort of doing all of that stuff and making sure things are ticked and tied and they're moving up down the right path and they're pulling up those metrics and trying to see what those lagging indicators were supposed to be and are we hitting those? Are they doing that, or are they getting busy and moving on to the next thing? It's more likely that there's already another project and you, Linda, were a great resource on this project, so we're going to move you to this thing. It looks like that implementation we did with you is already sort of up and running and there's really nothing we can do about it now. So just move on to this one. This is the shiny new thing in the drawer today. So not a lot. We should be doing more.
Thank you.
You've probably been asked by many companies to come work for them over the years. And you know, in accounting, this happens all the time. As a former CPA, or an auditor or tax accountants, people are grabbed all the time, especially early in the career before you get too established. Has that happened to you? And what are one or two places you thought about seriously moving to, and why? What's the one or two places you thought about? Oh, this would be really interesting. Just go ahead and park myself at Nike, for instance, for the rest of my career. Has that happened?
The question comes up, but I've never thought about doing anything other than consulting. And the sort of issue with moving around as a consultant is like I'm a change guy, but I don't really like change. It's kind of weird, right? So I like being in the organization I'm in and doing the things I'm doing and kind of knowing the process and knowing methodologies and knowing the politics and the personalities within the organization. And then, so I'd like having that sort of structure and infrastructure, but I like going out into the world and it being something different. If I show up at Nike, I think Nike's really cool. I love being on the campus, et cetera. But knowing that that's all I'm going to do would bore me.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to come next. And it could be really cool. It could be the worst thing that ever happened. But again, it's going to end and I'm going to move to the next thing. So just not knowing and showing up in different places. Like I've never worked, we talked about Korea. I've never worked in Korea. What if all of a sudden I'm on some project in Korea? That could happen. And just the excitement of not knowing where the next thing is going to be is exciting for me. And I just don't know that I would be okay saying, okay, today I'm showing up here again. I just don't know if I could do that.
Yeah. Understood.
Yeah.
As someone who I've spoken on lots of places. I've turned down Rio de Janeiro. I turned down Libya while Gaddafi was in power. I've turned down Moscow, and things like that. But there's things I wish I would have done in retrospect.
Yeah, maybe something will come up. Maybe maybe at some point I say, you know what, I need to get situated. I need to sit still for a while. It's all timing. But right now, and it's bummed me out that I've for the most part, worked from home for the last 2 years, with the pandemic and everything. I'm very much a guy who is in the airports and, rental cars and hotels and corporate apartments. And so to be in this room it's not the same thing. It's not
Yes.
exciting. You don't have, it's hard to build relationships. I've done a number of clients and project work since the pandemic, but when we get off this call, that's the end of it. And maybe we have a weekly call. So next week I'll jump back on and we'll talk for an hour. But during that hour, we're talking about the project. We're not talking about, your kid that just got married or, any of those other things that help you to get to know people. That all of that's just sort of out the window.
Yeah, I'm going to Korea in July, but virtually, unfortunately. English teachers in Korea this summer, like last summer. We had the U.S. consulate sponsoring me last summer, but it's virtual. And I want to go to
the same
Korea.
thing. Like I would love to be down in Bloomington right now. I mean, I realize some people aren't there, but I was on my way to India right before everything shut down.
Yeah,
got my ticket and everything. I was ready to go, and I was all excited because I've never been to India, and I was already trying to wrap time around it. So I'm going to be here for this week. So I'm going to get there a few days early and stay a few days late, and all of a sudden everything just got canned. So
that happened to me with Russia, and the forms are ridiculously long. They have to fill out to go to Russia. It's just all the work that was done to get the passport visa. So we have two more questions on the Jamboard. Who wants to is it Natasha's question sitting there on the Jamboard? No? Who else has one? Chen has one on the Jamboard. There's
thank you.
Questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Bonk. Yeah, that's my question. And thank you so much, Dr. Graves, for your presentation. And based on your slides, I have first question is that do you have any suggestions for people who are interested in doing consulting in the educational field? Because I see there are a lot of companies, but not the educational field. So I'd like to hear some advice from you if you want to do some consulting work in the educational field.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing you should do is get in touch with companies or organizations you think you might be interested in working with. I don't know what those companies are, but get in touch with them and just poke around, ask, are there opportunities here? Are there internships here? What suggestions do you have for someone who's interested in getting into this type of consulting? I unfortunately don't know anything about educational consulting. And even doing consulting work in higher ed, that's another industry that I haven't touched. And I actually thought that might be something that some direction that I would go to. It never worked out because higher ed, I think in the old world that I was in, was considered state and local government. It was part of that. So I thought, with my background, I spent 100 years in school and, that sort of thing. I did some teaching while I was down at IU. I taught in the School of Education with the learning, what's it called? Academic Learning Center, or I forget what it's called now. Right there at Jordan and right behind a catty corner from the library. You know what I'm talking
the Steady
about?
Skills was big.
Steady Skills Academic Student Center or something. Right. Yeah, so I spent 4 years teaching there. So I was thinking, this higher ed thing is going to be what I get into. I'm probably going to, make my living doing consulting work with higher ed, and it never happened. The opportunity just didn't come up. So here I am, X number of years later, and I don't have any experience in that area. But if you contact some companies who specialize or who work in educational consulting, it could be higher ed, it could be K through 12, it could be anything. They can probably give you some good insight.
You might want to look at the Spencer Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, and also the Gates Foundation. At least those would be places to start. Those are foundations that do a lot of work in education. Ford Foundation, I didn't mention that too. But Gates, MacArthur, Spencer, Hewlett. Hewlett in particular does a lot recently in the open education space. But there are a lot of small entities in the DC area that Natasha might be familiar with. Natasha, you got any education entities there in the DC area you might recommend besides the World Bank?
I mean, I would say, what you have throughout DC and the work that I do is you have tons of implementing partners that are doing various kinds of projects in the United States and overseas, nonprofit organizations. But then I would also say, there's the huge opportunities in private education, and so, and that exists everywhere, again, in the United States and overseas as well.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of foundations, I would agree with your list, Dr. Bonk.
Yeah, and then like I said, the World Bank in DC, I have a contact there, and they sometimes have internships there to get started and get your. The United Nations also we've had 1 or 2 students work in New York City for the United Nations, so you have to start looking at those entities. But there are a lot of small, just really small, 10 people like John's working at now with 15 people or less that are doing this kind of consulting in the education space. They're not names that you would know as widely as Accenture or something else. So who else had a question on the Jamboard?
Yeah, actually, oh, sorry.
You had another one, Chen. Okay, go ahead, Chen.
Yeah, very quick question. So I'd like to know something about the what kind of professional skills, like some kind of statistical skills. I remember that you mentioned you don't enjoy the statistical part a lot. Actually, I share the same feeling, but actually this is very important, right? So what kind of professional skills do you need to have for the consulting work? Thank you.
Just so professional skills in general?
Yeah. In general.
Yeah, well, in general, I think it's whatever you come to the party with, right? So whatever your educational background, those are going to be things that sort of get you in the door. And there are a lot of people who have sort of the academics, maybe they have prior work experience. Those things will get you a job. Being successful on the job is going to, in large part, be driven by, some of those softer things. How well do you communicate? How well do you team with people? How well do you work with others? All of that kind of stuff is I guess in my opinion, I won't say more important, but it's equally as important as what you know about whatever the subject matter or the topic is, or the skill set that you have. If you're the greatest person in the world at doing X, it doesn't matter if no one wants to work with you. And in consulting, the people you have to work with are going to change regularly. So you're going to bump into all kinds of personalities. You'll bump into different levels of folks. So just being able to work with people. And I know that sounds like a sort of a simple answer, but it's all of those soft skills, non-technical skills that you should sharpen if you don't have them. If you feel like, I don't really like going into a room and having to speak to people, that'll be a problem. Depending on if you're a consultant. If you're in other roles, there are some roles where there are people who just sort of work in rooms, by themselves or with other people who don't like to associate with folks. But if you're going to go into consulting, you need to be able to stand up in front of the crowd and kind of talk about whatever it is. You need to be able to shift, be flexible. You may say, hey, John, I want you to come in and talk to my company, and we're going to give you 20 minutes to talk about something. Well, by the time we get to me, there's only 5 minutes left. So how do I do my 20-minute presentation in 5 minutes? You got to be able to do that. So there's a little bit of dancing. There's some science to it, but there's a lot of art to being a consultant. So any of those soft skills, I think, spend some time thinking about those things and putting yourself in environments where you have to actually deliver on those types of things. Anytime there's an opportunity to volunteer or stand up or teach or any of those people type things, do it and just practice it and spend more and more time doing that type of stuff.
The Beatles didn't become a rock band that was famous through not practicing. They practiced over and over and over again. And I noticed personally, I became a better speaker after I gave 100 talks one year oh, you got to practice, and sometimes you fall down and get back up and you try it again. And, even last night, I had my students doing short little presentations on different weeks of the semester. And then I try and be a discussant, get my discussant skills, summaries and questions. So you're constantly practicing, So Xia Ying had a question. I could tell she unmuted and then she remuted her mic. So Xia Ying.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bonk. Thank you, Grace, for your presentation. Yeah.
Dr. Graves. Dr. Graves.
Dr. Grace, sorry.
Just John.
I guess maybe you'll have answered part of my questions. Based on your adventures in career, I just associate with the specific difference between the instructional designer and the consulting job like yours. Because maybe I understand the position of instructional designer in the job hunting market. Yeah, it's also a consulting job, but mainly focusing on the educational field.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it is, I think in the industrial, the consulting job like yours, it seems to be more challenging because as you said, it maybe required more skill set like speaking in a specific environment within a limited time. So I have a follow-up question that is, what's your most challenging task or experience from your beginning of your career?
Yeah. So
how did you overcome it?
when you start, everything's hard because there's a huge learning curve. And I came in with Ph.D. in Ed Psych, Cognate and Instructional Systems Technology. So I thought I was going to go in and work as an instructional designer. That's kind of what I thought I was going to do. So my foot in the door and all those internships was around instructional design. So it was developing training for different organizations, et cetera. When I got on my first project, it was one of those large SAP implementations. So I was a part of the training team. So putting together training for Medline Industries. So they're the folks who, if you probably don't know Medline, but if you've ever been to a hospital, those little plastic cups that you take your pill in, they make those crutches, adult diapers, just all of that stuff that you see in hospitals. That's what they produce. But I was on their training team. And then my next project, I did a little bit of training, but a little more, it sort of broadened out and I started doing more change management work to a point where I was managing teams that were doing change and training. And I just kind of got away from the training stuff. So today, I kind of touch it every now and then, like I did that cloud boot camp training and, there's some facilitation that could be considered, sort of L&D, learning and development. But for the most part, I sort of broadened out. There are folks who are in learning and development, which would be instructional designers, et cetera, that work for my company. So they're consultants as well, and they show up and they do the training pieces. So if I have a project that is, the full scope and it happens to have a training component, there's going to be somebody who's an instructional designer who's leading that part of the work. I may be the overall guy and kind of, making sure that everything's sort of working, but I'm probably not touching the training. The L&D folks, when you start talking, do they need a different set of skills, et cetera? It may be a slightly different, but a lot of those things that we've talked about, they need to have those types of skills. They need to be able to talk to their client because you almost think that, hey, if you just give me the requirements, I can go in a back room and sort of develop the training. I don't really need to associate or talk to people. And that's not true, right? There's going to be a lot of times where you're in front of folks and teaching them and explaining that to them and doing train the trainer programs, et cetera. So the same types of people skills that I talked about in change management are going to apply to anybody in L&D, instructional design. But there are a lot of opportunities for consultants with instructional design backgrounds. If you want to get into that world, it's out there. And the thing to consider is, where do you want to work? Again, you can work at the Army as an instructional designer because they're pulling together training courses all the time. You can work at, you know, any of those companies that we've talked about, or any company you think of, because there's always going to be a training department within organizations. If you want to work as a consultant, every consultancy is going to have some type of a training leg, and people who are instructional designers, et cetera. So there are tons of opportunities for people with backgrounds in instructional technology, instructional design, et cetera.
And those have grown since you graduated, and grown during the past 10 or 5 years because of this online and blended learning space has exploded, in part because of the pandemic, but it's happened before the pandemic, well before the pandemic. You just got to put on acceleration. And so, and by the way, I noticed I didn't introduce John properly. I just jumped right in and all, but John has his undergraduate degree from IU, as he mentioned, and his master's in ed psych, his undergrad in psychology, I think. And then he was a TA for 4 or 5 years as a TA, hanging out when I started here. That's what he was doing, working on his dissertation shortly thereafter I arrived. And, John's got a real rich background because he was a star of the football team in the high school in Northern Indiana. He was so popular as a great player, they recruited him. The IU football team recruited him to come to Bloomington, where he came, and that led to his
Stay on point. Stay on point, Kurt.
So my point is, John has become a founder of Adventure and Endurance Athletics. I would like John to talk about what that is. So, what this part of his career entails.
Listen, years ago, and hopefully all of you have realized this, but life is short. And as a result, I decided that I was going to spend time that I could doing things that I enjoyed. So I came up with this idea about end of 2012. And I said, you know what, every weekend for the rest of my life, I'm going to go out and do something interesting. Whatever I think is fun, I'm going to go do it. And so I said, I called it 52-52 because, there are 52 weeks in a year, and I want to make sure I go out and do 52 adventures in the year. I want to at least do one thing every week. If you ask me, hey, John, when's the last time you did something cool? I want to be able to say Saturday, and not like 6 years ago or whatever, because I was talking to people, and, you probably do the same. Kurt might tell you, yeah, I really like golf. I say, oh, do you really? I say, well, when's the last time you played? You're like, oh, it's been years. Well, if you like it, why is it years since you've played? And there are lots of folks who are like that. They have these things that they really enjoy, but they don't get out and do them. So I said, I'm going to start doing all the stuff that I really like doing, even if I have a full-time job and I have other things going on. I make a point to get out and do my thing. So I started on January 1st, 2013. We are now in March of 2022. Every week I've done at least one adventure. An adventure can be whatever I want it to be. It might be a 5K, it might be an ultra marathon, it might be a half marathon, it might be camping, it might be traveling someplace, but every week I get out and do something. So this past weekend I did my 83rd half marathon. This coming weekend, I'll be up on Mount Diablo doing some rock climbing. But every week I get out and do something. And, I've shown up and spoken, a couple of times and told people about this. And I get a lot of head nods and people are interested. And it's funny because there have been some people who have really gotten into it and created their own version of this thing. One guy even changed his career. He was a consultant, and he really was into art. He's been an artist sort of for most of his life. He now stopped consulting, and he's an artist full time. He opened up a studio. So he's sort of an extreme case, but a lot of folks have sort of taken a little bit away from that and have started trying to go out and do things that they enjoy. And that was what I was doing, at its simplest form, was trying to make sure that I didn't get to the end of my life and say, oh, I wish I had spent time doing something else.
Wonderful answer. And I'm sure everyone got something from that answer. Jennifer and I were talking about having fun today. In fact, that was the number one topic this afternoon after we had lunch together. So Jennifer, do you want to comment on that? I just saw you nodding your head constantly there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we have a job and we are working because we want to be happy.
Yeah.
And a lot of, because I'm planning to get a job in academia, and just observing, faculty members, it's like they're working, even as a grad student, you're working Monday to Sunday, morning to before you go to bed. And, I really want my life back, and I'm really hoping that I can really balance out and just prioritize some things. Maybe I can don't schedule anything on a Saturday or a Friday, at least Friday afternoon, something like that, and make time for myself.
Once somebody said, don't spend so much time making a living that you forget to make a life.
That's true.
I thought that was pretty profound. Like, get
Yeah.
out, and because there are lots of folks, and I'll tell you, and you probably know them, you may be these people, but folks will tell you, well, as soon as my kid graduates from high school, or as soon as my kid graduates from college, I'm going to start back doing so and so. As soon as I retire, I'm going to start doing so. And like, the clock is ticking, right? We only have so much time on Earth, and who knows how much time that is. And I just want to kind of go out with a bang, I guess.
So the last 2 years I've been running every day, and I've seen places I haven't seen before. I never was to Brown County State Park in 30 years. I was never to Lake Griffey, Lake Lemon, Yellowstone State Park, all this kind of stuff.
That's fun.
It's been fun to see everything that I hadn't seen. So it's forced me to see Indiana. And so I've taken 10,000 some pictures. I'm going to turn it into a daily calendar. I wrote philosophical quotes at the end of my first 500 days. So I'm going to turn it into a Dalai Lama pull-off calendar, something different. So I agree with you. You have to do something creative and fun and different, whether it's adventurous or introspective or something.
Yeah, and my interests are so varied. So I'm gonna run one weekend. The next weekend I'm gonna do wildlife photography. The next weekend I'm gonna go to a museum. But I'm doing things, And sometimes there are folks with me, and sometimes I'm alone. But yeah, I want to get out and have some fun.
I noticed Priska's taking a lot of notes on that. Right, Priska? She doesn't miss anything. So you have another question to follow up for John, or?
I did. And I do like to have fun, and I try to have fun, but I have too many jobs. But yeah, no, I actually never considered consulting before, but I feel like everything you asked in your questionnaire kind of fits me a bit. I kind of am all over the place in terms of my resume. But my main question now is that I wanted to position myself as somebody that could consult in learning for the fashion industry, for the apparel industry. And I was wondering if there are specific companies that cater to certain industries in consulting for instructional design.
Yeah, I don't know that. All of the folks that I know who are doing instructional design or learning and development, more generalist, I guess you would say. They can show up anywhere and do work. And I guess that would be the thing that I would, again, I don't know that world, but I would caution you to sort of be so narrowly focused that this is where I work. And then there aren't a whole lot of opportunities in that area. I think if you went into instructional design and you were kind of came out as a consultant, there are lots of opportunities that we talked about. It's possible that you'll learn of things and learn of more specific roles or organizations as a part of being, in that larger world. Nothing wrong with doing some research to figure out, do those places exist? Is there a need for an instructional designer within the Fashion Institute of Technology? Or I don't know. Yeah. And you have to assume that, the Fashion Institute of Technology is a place where people go to learn. So who's developing the courses or programs within FIT? I don't know. Is that a team of people? Are they looking for folks? Would you be okay going to FIT and just doing instructional design for them? Does that make it for you, or would you be interested in actually consulting? So going there and going to other places doing similar work. Those would be questions I would ask.
I mean, like Nike, like I thought they would have somebody in house. I wouldn't imagine that they would hire people and bring them in for
And
that.
I think they do have a training department within Nike. So all of those companies, if when you say fashion, if you're talking, folks who are making sports wear or women's clothes or whatever, all of those companies are going to have training departments. And in those training departments, there are probably going to be a lot of instructional designers. But to be able to be a consultant, and maybe I'm missing your question, but to be a consultant and bounce around to all of those different places, I don't know that exists other than a generalist in instructional design.
Got it.
Yeah.
The Fashion Institute of Technology was an early adopter of synchronous technologies and experimentations with virtual learning and VR and AR kinds of things. Just they were in the news like a decade ago for some innovations that were taking place and partnerships they were doing. So you just might do a search of virtual learning at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and you might find a couple interesting articles to read anyhow.
Kurt, are you Googling as we go?
I did Google that one, but I did know that. I did know that. I was trying to find the article actually, but so
I'm giving you a hard time.
Yeah, so nothing new there. It's 27 years ago, same thing. No, so we have more questions on Jim, but I want to be cognizant of Dr. Graves' time, and so I want to limit us to just one or two more questions. So if you put one on the Jamboard, I know Natasha's put a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. If she wants to refer to the chat, things that she's posted here, or someone else who's posted something to the Jamboard, please do it now.
I do have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So first of all, I truly appreciate the time that you're taking tonight. It's enlightening to hear you talk, especially about how you choose to live your life. And I hope that you work with young people because you would have so much to give to them. But I just had a question about when you're doing your consulting work and focusing on change management. I imagine that you're probably starting your conversations with the leadership of the organizations that you're consulting for. And I just wanted to ask about your observations when leaders are planning change and the way they think about it. When you come in with your level of experience and expertise, what are the patterns that you find about how they think about it? And then what you have to bring into the conversation to help them kind of get where they want to go?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. Once upon a time, and yeah, a lot of times conversations are with higher level folks. You may start with some folks from C-suite or senior leaders or senior managers at a minimum. It usually doesn't start any lower than that. But the conversations have changed over the years. Once upon a time, folks were coming in and they would ask you to come in and you were wondering why they asked you to come, because as soon as you got there were walls that were put up. There was a lot of resistance. They didn't understand, the value of, maybe some of the things you were sharing. It's different now because I think most folks are aware of change management. They know there's some benefit to spending some time preparing people before the change is sort of rolled out. So it depends on who you're talking to. Sometimes we're brought in by people who really understand change. Maybe you worked at a company that was more mature in that space, and now you work for this company. This company is going through some type of a change, and you're in a position, you're not, top leader or anything, but you have a voice. And you said, hey, what we really need is some change management consultants to come in and be part of this project. And you kind of walk them through and explain some things. So then by the time I get there, things are sort of prepped. People are sort of open to hearing some of this stuff. Then it depends on how we sort of engage them. I would never go in and just start saying, here's some things you need to do. I want to understand, what is it that you're trying to do? What problems are you having, et cetera. Based on where they are, what they're thinking, what their problem is, what their past history is with change, et cetera, I may have some recommendations. And that's all they are. They're just some things for you to think about, et cetera. I walk away and hopefully I get a call back and they say, you know what, some of the stuff you said makes sense. It did resonate. We do think we need some things. And then a lot of times we'll be asked to put together a proposal. So we'll say, hey, here are the things we think we can do in order to help you with those things that you talked about. Then we'll come up with a statement of work and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. And there's sort of a contractual part to that. And they sign off on it and we show up to do that work. Unfortunately, it doesn't always pan out that way. I'm dealing with a client right now who shall remain nameless. But there's a contract, and these are the things that I'm supposed to be doing with them. And every time I meet with her, there's always a little more. There's always something else. There's always, and it's like, you hate having to deal with that sort of thing because, I want to be the good guy. I want to be the guy who's there helping you. But at some point, you got to put a stake in the ground and say, you know what, Natasha, we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z. We've already done X, Y, and Z. Now we're on A, B, C, D, E, F. There are lots of things you're asking for, et cetera. So there's some skills that you learn around managing clients and managing an effort and not going over scope and those types of things. Does that answer your question?
It does. Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? So then when you're looking at organizational change, what are the big problems that you tend to bump into, or what are the ones that you bumped into most commonly as you're actually trying to bring the organization through a change?
Resistance is going to be the biggest thing. I mean, people don't like change. You work at a particular organization, you've been there for 20 years. You've been working in this one system for the last 15 years. It doesn't that there's a new state-of-the-art system. You have your system. And even if your system is broken, you've already learned the workarounds. You know how to do things in that system. You don't want to learn anything new. I'm, from retirement. I don't really want to. That's the biggest thing. It's just the people resistance.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the last question for tonight, if that's okay with everyone. And that brings us back to Jennifer. Jennifer's dissertation. So Jennifer will help me with this.
I was actually thinking about.
Yeah, so I'm going to come back. I'll let Jennifer add to the question. You've sent us, or in LinkedIn anyhow, you have a long list of expertise. And the last thing in your list is motivation. And that's what Jennifer was trying. One of the things she was trying to wrap her head around, how these 5 large conglomerates in Korea motivate their employees effectively when they're changing the management structures, the hierarchies, and flattening them down. So you have an ed psych degree. You have a psychology undergraduate. I have a weekly podcast show, and I usually ask, with 3 other guys, I usually ask people, what are the principles around what you're attempting to do? Can you list what are the principles that are takeaways that other people could implement? So what do you see as motivational principles or environmental design principles? I'm going to teach environmental design in the fall. What are things in environments that facilitate the change process, that motivate people to be part of the change, to be instrumental in that change, to buy in, not just buy in, but be advocates within that change.
Yeah.
From an ed psych background, what would you say are the components or the elements or the principles that could be situated and put in place that are somewhat replicable across environments?
Yeah,
Jennifer will add to that question. Jennifer?
Yeah, like just piggybacking on what Dr. Bonk just said, you know, like Korean organizations and even, you know, organizations, you know, in around the world. I mean, we are experiencing multi-generations in the within the same organization. But the organization is also seeking, you know, innovative ways, because to survive in this, you know, rapidly changing market, like conglomerates, big conglomerates in Korea have been very military, like hierarchical, and call each other by their titles. You know, you have to be, and we don't go by their first names, and that really set that hierarchy. But a lot of companies, like even the results of my study reveal that they are putting a lot of effort to, flatten that. And from your own, work experience in the change management, sector, in consulting, how people are very reluctant and not willing to change, but what are some of the strategies to get employee buy-in, especially the senior people?
So Jennifer asked strategies, I asked principles, and they are not using titles anymore in Korea in some of these places. So there is change happening,
Yeah. Well, I've never worked in Korea, but I have worked in organizations that have hierarchies and, whatever the top person says, goes, that sort of thing. That would be, kind of my work with the military. That's the way it is in the military. But some things that you keep in mind when you're going in to implement some kind of change. I mean, it starts from the top. So I would want to have some conversations with the executive leaders. So who's going to be sponsoring this initiative? Who's sort of, kind of top dog? And then I want to make sure that whoever that sponsor or those sponsors are sort of have a playbook. Because you're in the role doesn't mean you know how to execute the role, right? So if I'm the sponsor, maybe I'm just sitting here and I think that my role is to say yes or no, or tell people what to do or whatever. Well, that's not the role of a sponsor. There are certain things that I want to make sure that person is doing. I want to make sure that they're, sharing the vision, they're communicating, they're asking for opinions, they're doing all of these things and kind of have an open door. I want to make sure that's happening. In addition to sponsorship, I mean, I've used change agent groups. So when you start talking about multi-generational, et cetera, same thing goes with any organization. There are going to be different levels of people. There are going to be different functions. There are going to be different groups or teams within an organization. If you can find people who have a voice in each part of the organization or the agency and use those people as liaisons between the project and the business, that's going to be helpful. Because now it's not just John, the consultant, saying this. Natasha works in this particular area. So now Natasha has all of the communication material. She understands the vision. She can be a megaphone within her group to talk about it. They trust her. They know her. They've been working with her for years. And if she's saying this is a good thing and this is why we should do it, et cetera, that's going to be helpful. We do this thing for the past few years. I've been doing this thing around making things feel familiar, controlled, and successful. So if you have some type of change, you want to make sure that the change is going to feel familiar to people. People are going to do comparisons. They're always going to compare it to happened last time, or the thing that they learned about, or something they heard about. You can compare it to things that they know, things that they like, things that they don't like. But using comparisons help to make that change feel familiar. That's going to open some doors for you. If you give them some type of a sense of control, right? So if I say, I don't really like, or people don't like when there's chaos, when things are just being thrown at them, when things are being forced on me. But if I can have some type of control over what's happening, that's going to be helpful. And how do you give folks control? You can do things by, again, just allowing them to ask questions. If you give them a roadmap, so they have some idea of the timing of things that are going on, so that they can plan the rest of their life around this thing that's happening. If you give them that resource, that change agent, or that business transition rep, or the business readiness lead that they can go to and kind of vent to, that helps them out. You want to make it feel successful. So there are things that you can do and milestones that you can set up to say, when we get to this point, because you don't want to wait till the end to sort of celebrate or say we got it right or whatever. If you celebrate throughout and every milestone, every few months, you go in and say, hey, you know what, we made this milestone, we're tracking towards our overall goal. Here's a celebration, we're going to free lunch for everybody, or whatever it is. When you start talking about motivating people, it depends. So you have to understand the culture. You have to understand what motivates them. What motivates folks at one organization may not motivate folks in another. Is money the motivator? What can you do to incentivize people with cash, or with promotions, or with a day off, or with childcare? Or, what are some things that may be useful to motivate people? I don't know what that is, because I don't know the group that you're talking about, but I would do some digging around that just to understand. Again, all of it is human psychology, and understand the more you can understand about your stakeholders, or the groups that are impacted, are going to help you in trying to figure out how to motivate them. One of the things that we've been lately, I always say we because I'm always part of a team, and even if I'm working on a project by myself, there's an organization behind me, et cetera. But there's a thing that we've been doing around employee experience plan. I've also done some things with journey planning. So, if Kurt is part of the organization, what's his day-to-day going to look like as a result of this change? What are some of the things that he used to do? What's he going to be doing going forward? Why is it a good thing? What are the benefits? What are the benefits to the organization? What are the benefits to him as an individual? Sometimes there aren't benefits to the individual. Sometimes organizations are putting something in place because it benefits the organization, because it helps them to be more profitable, because it helps them to be more competitive. Yeah, it kind of sucks for you as the individual a little bit, but the overall organization is going to benefit from this. If that's the truth, you have to tell them the truth, right? Don't sell them a bill of goods, that type of thing. Did I start answering the question, or did I go way off?
I think you answered my question and part of Dr. Bonk's. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's so funny because, for my theoretical framework, I use Banduro's human agency theory, and I talk about agency and the change agent that you talked about. There are 3 types of agency within human agency: personal agency, proxy agency, and collective agency. And the part change agent part aligns very well with proxy agency, which means your leaders can't do everything by themselves, right? You need somebody as a proxy to deliver, what you want to them, what you want to do through them. So I think that's exactly what you were talking about change. Create,
the more you can use those people, the better. The more you can inform them and teach them and arm them with tools and that type of thing, it's
Yeah.
gonna help you out. If you're dependent on you and a small group and a couple of executives to kind of do something for a large organization, it's not
Mhm.
gonna happen.
Yeah, so just one question. So are change agents typically like the team leads, or like how do you identify this person would be good as a change agent?
So with your own criteria, it doesn't necessarily have to be the team lead. I could find out that team leads in this organization are the people that I want. But typically I'll come up with some type of criteria. I'll say, I want somebody who's been around for a while. So I don't necessarily want the new person that just came in. I want somebody that folks know, somebody who knows the organization. I want somebody who is okay speaking in front of the crowd. I want somebody whose opinion is usually valued. I want somebody who is helpful. I don't know, I was working with an organization recently, and he mentioned the Doubters Council. So what he was trying to do, if you start thinking about early adopters and laggards and everybody on that diffusion curve, he thought that it was more important to try to pull the people who are at the back of the bus and say, hey, I'm going to get them on the project. I have them do some work for us, because if I can get them, I can get everybody. And what I would argue is you spend more time with the early adopters, those people who are at the front, the people who are excited about the change, the people, make sure that it's one of those people, because they can help pull others along. And there are going to be some people at the back of the bus who never come along, and that's okay. That's going to be a small percentage of your organization, and they'll either, opt out. They'll go find another job. They'll do some of those things. But these people who are early adopters, those are the folks that you want to look at. But yeah, people who can communicate, people who have a voice, people who are helpful, people who are respected. Those are the types of people you want. And they don't necessarily have to have one of those leadership titles next to their name. They could be somebody else within the organization. So even if it's not my weekly status meeting, for example, I may ask for time in the status meeting. Hey, Joe, at your meeting every week, I want to come in and spend 5 minutes kind of giving an update on the project, or talking about some of the benefits, or talking about the status of the user acceptance testing, or whatever the case may be.
So I'll point out a couple of things that you mentioned. You mentioned familiarity, and from a cognitive standpoint, that's linking to prior knowledge, what people know already. That's a it's a valued principle in cognitive psychology. You mentioned control. So that goes back to being a pawn or an origin. You want people to be origins. You want people to be self-motivated, to have volition, have passion, have a sense of autonomy or empowerment. All those words. Empowered employees are going to be a lot more productive than those who feel like they're being manipulated by the environment, or feel like they're pawns in a chessboard. So you want to avoid being pawns. And then there's a reduction of ambiguity in all that, what you've said. You identify a team leader, you enable people to ask questions, you're reducing ambiguity, which reduces the tension, the internal turmoil, the dissonance. And if you've got a question, where you can go to get it answered, or potentially you have resources that are put up on this and made available for you, and you can access the resources or the person or the lead agent or the team leader or whatever. And then there's a behavioral aspect to it too, to celebrate. Humans are goal-driven creatures, so you want to celebrate successes, even if it's a small milestone, even if it's a one every week kind of small thing, or then the big things. So there's a number of principles, be they behavioral, cognitive, psychosocial, constructivistic principles embedded in all that what you said. So it's really eclectic in your response. I mean, there's no one particular learning theory that you're relying on. I guess that's what the point I wanted to get across. You're utilizing all aspects of psychology when you're dealing with people who change agents, not necessarily dissing any particular one. There's value in everyone someplace along the way, right?
Yeah, and then if you kind of look around, there are going to be all kinds of different change models and approaches, et cetera. They'll have a lot of things in common and similar, but there's some basic blocking and tackling that you should always do. What you want to call it, which academic you want to point to, it doesn't really matter. And,
Yeah.
oftentimes out in the world, nobody cares. They just want things to work. So,
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate an extended time with you, John, because it's been so long, and to have you available to us. It's been almost 2 hours. We've had the recording going, not quite, but we probably are double charged for this one. There's a bill coming to the School of Ed for this. We're your first higher ed client.
this was a lot of fun. It was nice meeting you guys.
Let's give John a big round of applause and a big, a couple of comments. I see a bunch of comments coming through in the chat window for you, John. And, I've got, if you still read books, I can send you my book, The World is Open, based on Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat.
Yeah. I have The World is Flat sitting over here on the shelf.
So I wrote to Friedman when I wrote this. My newest book, Transformative Teaching Around the World, written by Fulbright teachers who were in my class, stories of how they changing teaching in 22 countries. So a couple different, and then I got MOOCs and open ed books and other kinds of things.
Send some books. I'm going to send you my address.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, do that. I'll send you some chocolates too, and keep you active. And
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to see a film of you running a half marathon or marathon. That'd be so cool. Yeah, energy bars there. So Natasha's gonna send you some energy bars. You've got plenty of energy, I must say, and it's so delightful. I'm gonna stop the recording, and everyone, I'm not gonna stop this Zoom session. I'm just gonna stop the recording here. In his